Hi, welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about my top 10 books of 2021, and I'm excited to share them with you because reading is one of my favorite things to do. So if you like this kind of content, remember to subscribe and let's talk about these books. Okay, so I think in reality there's 12 books because a few of them are kind of put together because they're very similar. So there's not completely 10, but the theme, there's 10. There's 10 that are under the same theme. So we're counting it as the top 10 books of 2021. And then also my list for 2021 of the books I plan to read will be linked down below. I did not get through all of them. Pregnancy kind of threw me for a loop this year and didn't make it as easy to read as it normally is for me. And so it was a little bit of a struggle. But if you wanted to check out that list, I'll make sure it's down below. And I'll be making one for 2022, but I haven't gotten there yet. So let's talk about some of these books. Okay, I'm not gonna go through these books in super depth because I have done that already on videos throughout the year. So I'll make sure the videos these are in are linked below, and I usually have reviews for them also on my blog. So there's a lot of other resources, but I just wanna quickly go through and mention them and anything that I kind of just remember that sticks out to me about them. So we're gonna start off by these two books. This is about Ernest Shackleton, and this is Shipwreck at the Bottom of the World. So I got this one first, and this was per a recommendation from one of you. And I read these at the beginning of the year and loved them so much. And these Heroes of History books are really great. They also have the like Christian Heroes Then and Now series in this same type of, I don't know if it's by the same authors or whatever, but those are really good. So I read this one first and then read this about Ernest Shackleton, and amazing story. Absolutely amazing of him going to Antarctica, of all the things they were trying to do, their failures, some successes, but just amazing survival stories. And I feel like they could really inspire children. These are ones that I do want to read to my kids, and I think that they'd really enjoy learning about them and learning about this amazing story, especially in a time in history when we didn't have technology like we do today. I just can't even imagine doing what they did and surviving from it. Really, truly is an amazing story. Okay, the next book that totally blew my mind for 2021 was Secrets of Discipline. And I talk about how much I love this book in my video about this book specifically, but it was amazing. So this book is pretty darn old, and you can kind of tell by the way it looks that it's an older book, but I absolutely loved it. People always wonder how I like sleep train my kids, how I get them to listen so well, even though I don't always think they listen super well. But this book, I'm like, this is like, if I were to write a parenting book, it would be very similar to this book. And it focuses a lot on routines, establishing boundaries and following through with those boundaries, and also realizing kids are still kids, okay? Which means they do need parents, they do need boundaries, and not in the way that, oh, they're just being a kid. There's a lot of things that kids can learn if we will be willing to teach them, but it's gonna take some work on our part, and I think that's the hard part. We don't want to put in the work all the time of constantly keeping them from doing something. You know, like, oh, my kids, let me just a quick this is a tangent example, but so I have never put really any sort of locks on my cupboards. There's been a few cases that I have, or on bigger cupboards, that I did not want them to get into, but for the most part, I haven't ever done it. Even when I used to keep all my cleaning supplies under my kitchen sink, I didn't ever put locks on them. And I always just would grab them away and redirect them, give them something else to do and tell them no. And that's something else, like telling kids no is totally fine. You should be doing it. You should be telling them no. And so I would just redirect them, and eventually, like, they never got into cupboards. I never had to have any sort of child-proofing that way because it was never a problem. Yes, did it require work on my part? For sure, to be vigilant about it. But it was so much easier in the long run because I didn't have to have all these crazy things trying to keep kids out of everything. I've seen all sorts of things that people do to keep their kids out of stuff, and I never had to do that because I established this routine with them. And so then as they got older, they knew that they were just supposed to leave it alone. So I just wanted to share one quick quote from this book. It's on my computer over here, so I'm gonna like glance this way and read it to you. But it says, parents who allow their children to be defiant on small issues should be prepared for years of grief. Defiance doesn't go away. It grows in leaps and bounds. This is the start of a long and painful journey. And I just think this is so important for us to remember. Sometimes it's like those small things we're like, oh, it's not a big deal. But then those grow into bigger things. And kids remember these things. And if you don't train your children, they will train you to be a certain way. So if you don't help them understand rules, boundaries, routines, they will create a routine for you. And sometimes we don't like it so much. So I really, really love that book. It goes along with how I parent and a lot of things that I believe with human development, which is something I study a lot of. And so I would highly, highly recommend it. Okay, another book that I really loved this year was Digital Minimalism. And my husband had this book, I believe, and he gave it to me to read. And I absolutely loved it. And I just really love the focus on cutting technology out of your life. Again, you can still have stuff. You can still have TVs, you can have computers, you can have phones, but when it becomes our complete focus, that's when it becomes a huge problem, especially for young children. And if you've been around here, you know that I am somewhat of a digital minimalist. I don't like using tech a whole lot. My kids still watch TV shows, I still watch TV shows, but I don't use tech a whole lot in my homeschool space. I would prefer hands-on, like in-person, real-life learning, which is really hard to get from constantly being in front of a screen. And he also emphasizes the importance of returning to leisure, because so many times when we have a moment of free time, what do we probably do? You know, turn to our phones, scroll Instagram, look on Facebook, you know, look at TikTok, all these different things, instead of learning a new skill. You know, we become so much of a consumer of media instead of being a creator, you know, and being a creator is more important and teaches us so much more and keeps our brains working. And so he encourages us to learn a new skill, try something we haven't done before, maybe do some gardening, go outside, all these different things. And so I really enjoyed this book. I feel like from what I remember, it's not hard to read, but it does take a little bit longer to get through if I'm remembering correctly, but it was still very interesting and very fascinating. Okay, so the next couple books are together because they're both about Elizabeth Smart. And I grew up in Utah. I remember hearing about this story. Like, I remember when it happened and all those things, but I had never read anything about it. And these books were amazing and inspiring, and they're different. So this one specifically is her story, and it is a little bit more, she doesn't go into any sort of graphic detail, but she does go into detail about everything that happened. And so if that is gonna be hard for you, maybe you don't want to read it, but I just thought it's amazing to read people's stories and to read what they've been able to overcome and read where they are right now. And then I really love this book. This was a follow-up sort of to this book and goes through this redemption forgiving process basically. And in here she interviews tons of different people from different walks of life with different stories, and they share how they overcome, how they were able to move forward from those things, how they were able to forgive in very difficult circumstances. And I think, I don't know if I like this one better. They're different, but I really did love this book, and it opened my eyes to a lot of things that I hadn't really thought about, and it kind of gave voice to some of the things that I struggle with, and I just really loved it a lot. Okay, the next book I wanted to mention is I Like Me Anyway by Brooke Romney, and she's a member of the Church of Jesus Christ, the Latter-day Saints, which I am as well, but I feel like a lot of this book you can read and everything and not have to be a member of the church to completely understand what she's saying. It's more about having that connection with Christ, and then also just being okay with who you are. And I know it's a big struggle, especially for women, but I really love some of the points she brings out. It's a very easy read too. As I look through, I'm like, it's really big words. But I love how she gives exercises at the end that ask some different questions, like when has someone held back their judgment of you or someone you love? Share that story and what it meant to you with a friend or a group of women. She has tons of questions that really get you thinking. and help you step outside of yourself as well and not being as judgmental. She shares some of her experiences, some of her stories, and how she is a Time Out for Women speaker. Not that we've had a whole lot of Time Out for Women things, but it's a huge conference thing and that they usually do throughout the year in different locations. And she is a speaker there, which is where I first heard her talk and just share her experiences. And I just really enjoyed and thought this book was really good. Okay, the next book I want to mention is Atomic Habits. And I really enjoyed this book. My husband gave it to me as well. He had a lot of these books that I read this year that became favorites. But one of my favorite things that he mentioned in here is at the very beginning. He talks about the British cycling and how they were not good until recent years. And they got a coach that said, let's focus on just being 1% better every single day. So they focused on little things. Some of it was just changing what they were wearing. Some of it was something to their bike. Some of it was their workout, their eating, just these teeny little things. Like if we can be 1% better every single day, it will change your whole life. And it did, because now British cycling is huge. Like they're so much better than they ever were before. They've won a lot of different things. They do very, very well in the Olympics, all these different things because of these 1% improvements and just the importance of establishing habits. And this whole book gives so many great ideas, and it's very simple things, very basic things that I really loved. And then one of the quotes that I thought was amazing from this book is, habits do not restrict freedom, they create it. And so sometimes we feel like that, right? As we create these habits that, oh, it's tying me down. I'm sorry, I can't do something because I have this thing I have to do. It's, this routine, this habit that I've created. And we look at it more as restricting instead of enabling us to do more things, just like their habits did. That 1% made a huge difference. And as we do that 1% in our lives, it makes a huge difference and opens up more opportunities for us. So I really like this book. And then the next book I wanted to mention was Educated by Tara Westover. And this was a really amazing book as well. It was something I did not know a whole lot about at all. And it actually happened not too far from where I live. But reading her story was very, very inspiring, and also reminded me of the importance of us being educated, having an understanding, and not just one view, because she grew up with her dad teaching just this one-minded view of the world, which can be extremely, extremely dangerous. We have to be very, very careful with that. And so being open to different perspectives, it doesn't mean you believe all the perspectives, and you don't have to believe all of them, but being open and understanding to the differences in the world, the different perspectives, the different beliefs, and discovering for yourself what you believe. And that's kind of what this whole story goes through. And it's just really amazing, inspiring story that I really loved. Okay, the next two books are books that we read for book club that I enjoyed this year. And the first one was Anxious People. And this is just a fun story. I enjoyed how it was written, and I enjoyed that it was a mystery. I don't feel like it comes off as a mystery novel, but it is. And so there's some mystery to this story. But then also it just reminds us that everyone has struggles. So this group of people, like there's a bank robber, and then this bank robber ends up with this group of people that are touring an apartment complex, or an apartment like room. What do you call it? Just an apartment. I'm like, what do you even call it? And so they're in there looking at, checking out this apartment, seeing if they want to buy it or rent it or whatever it is. And then this bank robber is trying to hide from the police and stumbles in to their situation. And so then it's kind of, they're all being held hostage and sharing their stories, sharing what's going on in their lives, and how people from different walks of life, people with different experiences, and just very different kinds of people can become friends. They can work together. And I just thought it was a very good story because of that. It just shows that despite our differences, there can still be unity in our lives and we can work together. And then we also read We Are Not Free, which I thought was amazing. This story is so interesting, the way it's written, what it's talking about. It's talking about Japanese internment camps, which I was somewhat familiar with, but a lot of people in our book club were not. And it also isn't I love reading World War II books, But this wasn't something I'd actually had read stories about very much. Like it's mentioned throughout some of the books I've read, but nothing like this. Like this is specifically focusing on Japanese internment camps, but it's told from the perspective of the kids that were there. So it follows these individual children and talks about their experiences in these internment camps and then what life is like after and trying to come back home and the different experiences they had. So I loved it just because it was a whole new perspective on a World War II category that I don't feel we talk about very much, or we don't spend that much time studying. Okay, the last book I wanted to mention is also a World War II book called Beyond Valor, but I really like this book because it's not a story I've ever read something about. There's, you know, several stories you hear over and over again, similar ideas. This one I had not heard about. So they were bombing Japan, and they had this phosphorus bomb that detonated inside the plane. It like shot back up the tube instead of going out like it was supposed to. So this man, Red Irwin, takes it and he somehow gets it off the plane, and phosphorus burns extremely, extremely hot. So he's covered in burns, and they divert from where they were planning to go and land someplace else. And he miraculously lives through this, like complete miracle with the amount of burns all over his body. And just going through his story, I just thought it was really good. And again, if you're looking for something that's World War II, but a little bit different than most of the stories you hear about, I feel like this is a really good one. Okay, so those were my top 10/12-ish books of 2021. And I enjoyed them all very, very much. I learned so many different things. I'm very excited to read more books and to discover new books next year. And so if you have suggestions for me, please put them down in the comments, because really some of the best books I've read have come from you guys. And if you enjoyed seeing this video, please give me a thumbs up, and I will see you next time.